Everyone, thank you so much for coming to this morning's Exploring the Faith session and, of course, watching online. I'm Michael Oswald, a relatively new member of both First and the Adult Formation Committee, and I'm just delighted to introduce today's session. We don't always get a chance to hear in a deeper way kind of the spiritual and practical journeys of the wonderful staff here. So I think we have a really unique few minutes coming up. Our host, Tom Brandt, will be asking our special resident ministers, Nathaniel and Tommy Langejans, to reflect on their experiences at First Pres and give us a sense of their hopes for the future. Thanks so much, Tom, Nathaniel, and Tommy for doing this. Finally, just real quick, I want to give a shout out to our Lenten Forgiveness program, which looks absolutely amazing. It's March 9th to April 13th. 3 to 5 every Sunday, led by Dr. Jennifer Griggs, a forgiveness coach. The website gives the fuller description, but please remember you've got to pre-register to attend. Only 10 spots, so and they're probably going fast. So, thanks so much.
Well, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you, Michael, for that introduction. I have a few questions here to ask Tommy and Nathaniel about their experiences here at First Pres as resident ministers, and what's going to happen what may happen, hopefully, when they leave. So my first question is, what were some of your hopes in coming into the resident ministry experience?
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. We don't always dress like this. We're heading to a worship service directly after this, so it's the only reason we're all gussied up. So I was looking at First Presbyterian Church of Ann Arbor and a solar pastor role in Port Huron, Michigan, and there were a lot of factors that went into the decision. But I think as I was looking at the residency program, my hope was that it would be a full pastorate. I mean, I was, third year out of seminary, just coming out of seminary, and I was like, I'm ready to be doing the job. I want to get going. I'm so excited for this career, and so I had hesitations because I worried that this was going to be more like an internship, or I wasn't going to be a full pastor for another 2 years, and was happy to learn as I went through the interview process that wasn't the case, that we're both fully ordained ministers. We're both plugged into the life of this church in so many ways, and I've been really thankful for that. So one of my hopes with a program like this, which also has an educational component, helping you grow in skills that maybe seminary wasn't as focused on teaching us, is leadership skills. Not that I hadn't been a leader in other places, but just specific leadership in a church. I'd been to 2 or 3 session meetings ever, and so what does it mean to moderate and actually use the polity that I had learned at the start of my freshman year of seminary 3 years earlier? And what is it? What are the interpersonal dynamics to keep in mind? How can I be a leader for a church community like this? And I think with Dave and I have a regular one-on-one where we talk about this. We get to talk about it in resident ministry forums, and thankfully we get to live it out as well. So I've been happy to say that my hopes for that side of, for being a full pastor and also getting to lean into the leadership side of things, have been very much fulfilled so far.
Thanks for the Adult Faith Formation Committee for hosting us, and thank you, Tom, for moderating today, and for everyone being here today. Similar to Tommy, I too wanted additional training, but more on like the administrative, financial sort of side. I took a class I want to say second to last year of seminary, and it was a 12-week class on church administration, and only in one of those sessions, which was just under about an hour, did we cover finances. And I was like, oh, that's not good. And I was looking for, I was looking at this church or staying on at my previous position in suburban Philadelphia, but decided on coming here just because of the strength of the program offering too. And the fact that, like Tommy said, we would be full pastors, which is something that I was looking to do. was looking to lead worship and experience all the different areas and breadth of the church. And I felt like I could do that here at First, because First just has so many different options and offerings. So.
Nathaniel, excuse me. Closer and move.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, don't be afraid.
All right.
These people want to hear you.
Yeah, I think that's about it.
Okay, great. How would you say you have grown in your faith during the residency?
Oh, I can answer. All right. I'll go first. That's a really great question. I think I've grown in my faith just by being open to more different collaborative ideas. Tommy is a really good person at collaborating with, especially on worship-related things. We have really one of a couple of services we've really collaborated on has been the Glacier Hill services that we do for during Ash Wednesday or Christmas Eve, or the Christmas services that we do at Glacier. And Tommy has been a really wonderful colleague, and just hearing his testimony, his stories, his faith experience has really sort of shaped my own experiences too. I feel like I'll ask Tommy a lot of questions and he'll give me a lot of responses. He doesn't ask me a lot of questions really. I'm more the one asking him things. But I feel like Tommy just has a lot of wise things to say. So I feel like I've just grown by becoming closer to Tommy. So, yeah.
Well, I would absolutely say the same to you, Nathaniel. No, it's amazing to see, just different pastors will approach this job and their relationship with God differently. And one thing that always impresses me about how Nathaniel does that is his focus on justice. He's really good at bringing ministry to the real world and to real issues that are we're dealing with in our time. Sometimes I'll ask Dave or another colleague to look over a sermon, and Dave's consistent feedback is like, "This is good. What do we do about it? Like, what does this have to do with the world? Lean into that more." And I asked someone else for feedback, and they gave me the same thing. And so, to see Nathaniel not to be strong in that is really really helpful as I work on that. In terms of faith in general, I guess a similar answer, people's relationship with God, the prayers that they find meaningful and bring to meetings, the scriptures that they focus on, and the spiritual component is so a part of who each person is, not just pastors or staff, but the congregation as well. And so I think I've really, getting to help with Christian education, leading the Journeys Bible study, helping with some elder and deacon training, getting to help with youth group here and there. It's one thing to get to know somebody and know their life, and it's another to get to know how they think and what they believe about God. And I'm just forever shaped by how other people's perspectives in this church are allowed to vary, that we're able to, even within the Presbyterian church, have disagreements and ask questions of each other. So those spaces where we're able to have discussions about faith together have been really enlivening for me. And I think just the process of creating a sermon and, like I was saying, making those connections, how does this apply to real life? What is this, what, if any, where, if at all, does God show up in this story? I just find myself asking those questions more and more outside of the church, I would say, as I go about in my daily life. And that's been, something I've greatly appreciated.
I would also, too, just like to second the part about continuing ed classes and adult faith formation and children's faith formation, too. I feel like part of what we do here really well is have great conversations in the sanctuary, but they only stay in the sanctuary, right? But when I see our conversations that we have in here or in the children's classes or in the youth classes or even in youth group, right? we're able to continue those conversations that we have in the sanctuary. And that to me is really meaningful. And having that consistent sort of, like Tommy says, questions, asking, discernment, even disagreements is really important and really wonderful. Because the church's strength, I think, comes from its diversity, not from us being conformists.
Well, thank you. How have you found God during the residency, and where does God show up?
So theologically, God is everywhere. So everywhere God already was, but that's not a fun answer. I see God in, especially for me, it's social hour. Is a place that's consistent for me, or someone passing through the church, or just speaking with whoever's at the desk. It's those little moments of connection I get to have as a pastor with people throughout the week, and that our congregation gets to have with each other. There's something really special about the communal aspect of church that I think COVID prevented us from, and now as we continue to come back from that, I think it's become clear just how important that is to get to be together in person. And so I really see it in so many just small conversations I have with people, as well as the big cool things.
I agree with what Tommy said entirely. I think I would add, I think I do see God in people and in interactions with people. I've really found that, especially for me personally, it's hard to get spiritual enjoyment out of leading worship, just because particularly I'm thinking about the next thing or another service or different classes that I'll have to teach later on Sunday. But I often get enjoyment out of specifically going into the sanctuary during the week when no one's here, right? And just sitting and looking at the sunlight reflecting through the stained glass, witnessing the ethereal in there, and personal prayer and devotion as well. To Tommy's earlier point about, meeting people and seeing God in people's faces, I really agree with that too. And I've especially found this with when Tommy and I were first new here, is when people invited us into their homes and so forth, and were very welcoming and accepting of us. That was really wonderful and very special, and continues to this day. So,
Great. Well, thank you. So what have you learned about First Pres as a church that you would want us to know?
The second part of that question is so important.
we shouldn't do things just because we've done them before. We should always be wanting to try and innovate. Don't be afraid of innovation. Sometimes I feel like we have a tendency to go with what is safe and what has worked for us before, but what might not always work for us in the future. So we shouldn't be afraid to try new things.
I'd say it's a blessing. I feel partially this is probably because of the church, and partially because I'm not always good at saying no to things, but you get pulled to a lot of little side things and little things to help. So, the FIA this morning, we figured that out on, Friday, and put it together and did it. Sometimes I'll help, clean it up after event. Sometimes it's a prayer service with another church, all sorts of little different pieces. And you realize this church does a lot. This church connects with people in a lot of different ways, and that's really a strength. It's really encouraging to see people in the church leading those things and serving in our community. And I think, as we approach March Mission Madness, our hope is that we lean into that strength that is already a part of our church, which is telling people about mission and getting them excited about service, which I love how Diane Nibbs describes it as a bug. Once you put yourself out there and do and serve, you want to do it again. You're like, oh, that wasn't so bad, and that wasn't so bad. That's not always the case. Sometimes it might be that bad, but but there's something really special about how our church does that, and how we can continue to, I think, push in that direction. And just like Nathaniel said earlier, I feel like we've been received very warmly overall. The church does that really well. I've seen that in new members that have come since we've been here as well, and really appreciate that.
To Nathaniel's point, I sometimes joke that there is a third tablet Moses brought down from Mount Sinai that tells us that First Presbyterian Church of Ann Arbor is going to do this at this time, and that's it. But so what are some of the most important things you will carry from this experience into your next chapter?
I think the big one for me is collegiality. That is something I've really learned here. Not that I hadn't learned this before, but that was specifically emphasized. Being good to colleagues, being respectful of deadlines, and sending in work, of course, beforehand, but also making sure that you're available to chat or call or what have you. Tommy and I are really good about getting lunch together. We do it about every other week or so, if not more frequently. We're really good about, looking after one another, I would say, too. And so that's something I will really take with me is serving, being caring and kind to those that I'm serving with, and checking in on them, right? It's not a race to the top. It's a journey together, because we are all on this faith journey together. And I think that that's something that First has really emphasized to me. I would also say too, one of the things that I would really take from this experience too is the fact that First has been so engaged with local partners. That is something that I really have been looking for in the various different churches that I've been applying to and so forth. But just the sense of strong, like Tommy was saying, the missional component of this church is so very strong, right? We're engaged with Friends Indeed, Alpha House, the rotating shelter, and so many different organizations around the community, and that is really crucial, because we are all in this work as God's disciples, and we need to carry out this work together.
So I'm going to take a moment now to gush about something I've learned from Nathaniel. So I'm very much a person that loves overthinking things, loves planning, and just needs everything to be my definition of perfect before I put them out there, which is not the same as something that's actually perfect, because Nathaniel has really been a great encourager and voice for going out and just doing it. Like, hey, just try this. Like see how it goes. And that's a voice that I need. That's a voice I don't tell myself. So it's a voice that I need. And as I hear Nathaniel's encouragement in that, I begin to hear that voice within myself. So I greatly appreciate that. Like I was saying before, you work with so many different pastors and staff members here, and I think, everyone approaches the job a little differently, in part because their positions are different, but there's a lot that we plan together and share in common with our roles. So, and our roles can kind of blend together sometimes. Sometimes I'm, leaning into pastoral care stuff, and we'll be partnering with Mel and our parish nurses. Sometimes I'm leaning into mission with Mark and Diane and local mission. And you're just, pulled a lot of different ways. You see how a lot of different people lead, not just on staff, but in our committees. You take away, all sorts of great ways that they lead in their respective fields. and you learn from some mistakes as well, and things that you'll say, oh, I don't need to maybe take that with me. So, and everyone has that, right? People, have certainly seen me make mistakes as well. So it's just being in a church with so many people leading helps you see all those different perspectives and helps you kind of pick and choose, what do I want my leadership style to look like going from here? And then just what I mentioned before as well, I came in curious about, church leadership and how all of that functions. And I've been really happy that we've gotten to lean into that in our resident ministry forums and in one-on-ones with Dave. So I feel certainly more equipped than I did when I came in.
Thanks.
Well, I will just say too, I know this sounds like a little bit something that should always happen, but at the previous church I was at, some colleagues would often embarrass other colleagues by pointing out their mistakes in front of meetings and so forth, and publicly, sort of like chastising them. That does not happen here. Oftentimes, if people have criticisms or constructive feedback, it's offered one-on-one. And that I really appreciate. And we are also very good as a staff, too, I think, about complimenting each other on the work that we do well. So that is a good strength, too, and something that I'm looking to bring to my next position. So.
Great. Well, of course, your time with us is getting pretty short. And so what's next?
Hopefully a church. Yeah, we've been in the interview process, and it's been fun, kind of going through that together. A lot of churches have a good, system for doing that, and some of them do not, and you learn that pretty quick. But yeah, I'm looking for a church in the Midwest. I'd love to continue pastoring, either as a head pastor of a small church or an associate pastor at another congregation. If there's a focus on pastoral care or Christian education, I love that. I hope there's a worship component, because I've loved getting to do creative things with worship, especially at the 11:30 service, and yeah, those are kind of where I want my focuses to be for my next position. So I'd love if I ended up not so far away, so I can come and say hi to First Pres here and there, and celebrate the 200th anniversary coming up, which is crazy to think about. Yeah, so talking with a couple of churches now, and when I have big, wonderful news, I'll make sure to share it, but it is in the process.
Yeah, similar to Tommy, it's a long and arduous process. I was explaining this to one of my Catholic friends who, they don't have the same, right, the bishop assigns where the priest goes and so forth. And after I explained the committee process to him and everything, he asked me, he's like, Nathaniel, is the associate pastor nominating committee the same thing as the College of Cardinals, which votes on the Pope? And I was like, I don't think so, but maybe, I don't know, like, great question, James, but I don't really know. But it is such an interesting process. I have had some places give me a full-on length of interview questions, which has been really wonderful in preparing, but also something that I've never had done before. And some interviews have been longer than others, or some churches have been more conservative than others. I had a church that specifically contacted me and asked me if I believed in everything that the Bible said, and the Bible was without error. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I can actually say that confidently, right? Because one of the passages in the Bible says that we're not allowed to wear fabrics with different colored fabrics, right? And I do that all the time. So how can I confidently say that I follow all the passage, right? Just look at this, right? I'm doing it right now. So, it's just a very interesting process getting to interview with different churches all around the country, and you come into contact with some really interesting and awesome Presbyterians too. But that also makes me really appreciate First all the more too, how loving and kind and wonderful you guys have really been to both me and Tommy. So we'll keep you updated as things occur in that regard. So.
We have a little more time if there are questions that people here in the room would like to ask Tommy or Nathaniel. Please, yes.
Thank you both. This has just been so wonderful to hear your kind of personal response and aspirations, and also your experiences while you're here. I want to pick your brain, Nathaniel, for a second, because of your interest in kind of shuffling things up and trying not to get too rutted into too many ruts. So I have, for a long time, had problems with the word mission because of the history of the word mission and what has been done in the name of missionary activities. So if this is just to pick your brain. So if you were given the job of renaming and finding another term for the word mission, what might you come up with?
Yeah, Sid, I really agree with you. I think mission itself has some imperialist overtones to it, right? I often think of, missionaries bringing Christianity to this country and forcibly converting indigenous populations, right, to their own beliefs, right? And that obviously isn't who we're called to be as Christians. I think, honestly, a better term for mission, if not service, would be community care. Right, because we're caring for the community as a whole, right? And whether that community be our world, our country, our state, or even our local municipality, we are caring for the community by doing work and serving others, right? I think if we look back at the medieval church, right, they were oftentimes engaged in education and counseling and services to support the local community, right? I think that sort of holistic sort of care should be continuously applied to the community as a whole. So I think that's the phrase that I would.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is almost like an exit interview. But I will say for both of you, we will be watching for white smoke in the future. But I do have a but I do have a serious question. So as you're leaving with sleeves rolled up, are there any suggestions you would make for the church to become more welcoming for new members? Either physical changes or process changes, welcoming in general to encourage individuals and families to visit, to join, to feel welcome here.
One of the things I've been thinking about in that regard is we do this in confirmation classes. We occasionally bring in confirmation students to observe session. And I think that's a wonderful experience, right? They get to see church governance in practice. I would love it if new members here were able to afford that same experience, right? They get to experience and see how the church functions, right? And know how governance is done. I think that would be really, really helpful. I also think too, especially with newer folks, it would be wonderful to get them more engaged, right? I feel like we sometimes lose touch with the people that join, right? So getting them involved is really important. I think some folks are really, like Michael, right, is on the Faith Formation Committee, and he's a newer member. So that's really great, and we should continue to seek out those opportunities. So.
Yeah, I would just say this is an area where I feel like First Pres has a lot to celebrate. I think we do this particularly well. I love that we start worship at the font, welcoming, those consistent words we say every time. Welcome home, children of God, and whoever you are, wherever you've been, you're welcome here. That's huge. I think using one thing I try to keep in mind, I learned this from Hannah when she was here, using language that doesn't patronize. It can be really easy to say, we're so glad you've joined us here for worship today. Really, to capture the community we want, which is not hierarchical, we'd say, we're so glad to be worshiping together today, if that makes sense. Same thing with children's ministry. seeing that as just an equally valid ministry, and the children as full members as anyone else in the church, and using language that reflects that. I'll just name too that, as part of my job, when I see a new member, if they talk about a hobby and I'm like, oh, we do something like that, we as pastors try to connect them, like, oh, you might like this, come check this out if it sounds fun. And I think having members, not that we don't have this, I haven't not seen it, but to the extent that we're able to know what's going on and recommend people to things we might enjoy as a congregation as a whole, I think is an opportunity for even further growth. But again, I think this is a field we do pretty well in.
Also like to add too, I would love to see us do like a bowling league or something like that, like a softball team or something like that as a church. I think that would be a great way to get more folks involved in sort of recreational activities that we do to help build community bonds and so forth. So
Thank you.
I just enjoyed your comment about not being afraid to try things. I was a coach for a long time and a head coach, and the one thing what you're talking about is in my staff, I tried to create an atmosphere that they were not afraid to say something. That even though I may not like it, they were right in what they were doing, and I think that was. And also created that if they wanted to try something, even though I knew that I've tried that many, many times before and failed, I gave them the opportunity to do that, to see what we're talking about. But the atmosphere of being able to say things in the staff, and being not belittling someone, but as a constructive criticism to that, to be a positive, to where there's a solution to that problem, not we have a problem, what is it, and how do you correct it? But being willing to try things is very, very important, I think, as a whether you're an assistant or the head guy, it's very important.
Anybody else? Jane.
I'll head down and you can maybe stay here.
Well, first of all, thanks so much for doing this. It's so wonderful. I'm so glad we have you on tape. And then I just want to know, I watch the staff here and they work so hard all the time. And I'm wondering, what have you learned about how to have a life outside of this?
I've learned that when you're at a big church, it's hard to do that. It's hard to say no, and partially, I want to be generous with my time and help out where where possible, and but it is balancing that and making sure you have the strength to continue doing that to any extent going forward. So, I think, what have I learned about it? That it's easy for me to neglect it if I'm not careful. That I have to be okay with telling myself I'm not lazy if I have to say no to something here and there, and that will actually help me do like better quality work in the week ahead on different things. So you never want to say no to somebody who has a sincere request, but yeah, it has to be balanced. You do what you can, and it's great that we have multiple pastors that can share the load. If someone gets sick or a couple people are out of town, we have still have plenty of people to lead the service. But with a bigger church, there's also more questions and things to get done between that. So yeah, I'm gonna head out. Thank you all.
I would also just second, balance is such an incredibly wonderful word, but finding that balance is often so very hard. I've found myself, especially in the last couple of months when Tommy and I have been searching for churches, that balance is becoming increasingly harder to find as I'm like finishing work at like 5 and then going home and then applying for churches until like 7 or 8 and doing interviews and whatever else is very challenging nowadays to find that rest. But I think having some breaks and space, I try and take like maybe a 30-minute walk every day during work, just to get my head out of the what I'm doing and get a little bit of a break, and taking some rest time too, and then I often come back to work more rejuvenated and invigorated to do the work, and it's good work, right? But as Tommy said, finding that balance is really critical. So.
Time for another one?
I think so. Yeah.
Yes. There's been a lot of discussion and information about the decline in church membership generally throughout the many denominations, and wondering what you see as the direction that Christians can take to capture this desire, this feeling of spirituality that is there, but not participating in formal church membership. Where do you see the direction that would be for us to be looking at?
Wow, that's such a wonderful question, and I can't presume to answer all of that, but I'll do my best. As you said, Barry, our church membership was reached, I think, a high point in the 50s and 60s in the PCUSA. We had like over 3 million members, and now we're down to just about 1 million, just over 1 million, I think. And I think God doesn't call us to put more butts in the pews, right? I think God calls us to be faithful with the butts that we do have in the pews, right? And in that, I mean to cultivate faithful discipleship amongst the people that are already there. I don't mean to say that we can't go out and expand more in our convictions and challenging and talking to more folks and so forth, right? But I think, especially here at First, we do a very good job of maintaining things and keeping the status quo as things are, right? And in that we have really cultivated a dynamic Christian education system here for adults and for children and for youth, and we've fostered continual development, and I think that that's wonderful. But I think that it will look different depending on which church you're in and what region you're in as well. I've also heard some talk too recently about the mainline Protestant denominations like evangelical Lutherans or Episcopalians or Northern Baptist and so forth, or even Presbyterians and UCCs merging denominations or merging individual congregations or the denominations as a whole. And I don't know if that will work out or not, or what will happen of those conversations. But I am hopeful because a lot of mainline Protestants like Episcopalians, Presbyterians, UCCs, AME, we all believe similar things, and we're not that far apart theologically. So it doesn't really make sense to me why we're all segregated into our own different denominations. If you ask me, we have more in common than what divides us. So I have to get down to business. I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, thank you all for coming, and see you next week.